game. I mean,
you probably have spent all week on that one.
Explain. I mean, how do they get away from the running game so much?
Yeah, it's the week before, Mike, against Chicago, they came out early in the game and ran the ball really well, and the defense couldn't hold up, and they got behind, and they had to throw the ball. And I know that Jason Garrett has been heavily influenced by his experience with the Cowboys in the 90s. He was my backup. He knows how we went about winning, and it's not necessarily the way that it's done in this league now, but we would build leads by throwing the football, and then we would win the game by running
the heck out of it.
Absolutely. And a number of Emmitt's rushing yards came in the second half, mostly in the fourth quarter.
About 70%, yeah.
And if there was ever a time really for this Cowboys team to resemble the Cowboys of the 90s, last week was it. They had a 23-point lead at halftime. They were running the ball extremely well, and yet in the second half, it was Eddie Lacy who had almost twice as many carries as DeMarco Murray had. So it's a little bit confounding, to say the least. And with the real question, that I have, Mike, that I don't know the answer to is, how many of those pass plays came in as running plays? We do know that the first interception, was a called run, but I have a feeling that there were a number of other runs that were called, and Tony checked to some passes based on the looks, and that's not necessarily a bad thing in most normal situations, but given the way that game was going, I just felt that had they have done nothing more than run the football and then punt if they failed to convert on third, I think they would have won by multiple scores.
Absolutely. And I thought the worst one, and everyone got away from it, was the one in their own end where they got the punt return. They kept the ball 19 seconds. I mean, that was insane.
They were up 12 at that point, and looking at it from my perspective as a quarterback, you're thinking, okay, we'll get the game into the fourth quarter with a 2-score lead, and they failed to even get out of the third quarter. Like you said, they threw the ball first and second down, both incompletion, stops the clock, played right into Green Bay's favor, and then the sack, and then the big return, and then it was game on from that point on. And I think one of the things that probably has not gotten a lot of discussion is the Packers opening up the second half. First play from scrimmage is a 60-yard run by Eddie Lacy, and that run immediately kind of gave them notice that, okay, well, hey, maybe we will be able to do some things here in the second half, and then immediately they were in scoring position. But it was a bizarre game. I've just never seen a team lose a game the way that the Cowboys lost that game in the second half.
I agree, and sports is tricky. I've been around long enough to know it, that sometimes teams just can't stop the other team's momentum. I mean, and whatever you do, you need that one play to get it stopped, and they just couldn't come up with that one play to change the momentum in games. And I know that Bill Parcells always preached that. Jimmy Johnson always preached it. Get the play that can change the momentum back in a game.
Yeah, and I think that, coming into the season, the defense was expected certainly to be better than they've been up to this point, but the thought has always been that it's the offense that's going to help carry this team, and the offense really hasn't done its part. The defense was terrible in the second half of that game. They gave up touchdowns on every possession, but the offense, again, I tend to focus on this one more on the offense because I just felt that they were the ones who mismanaged it and could have really helped their defense out.
It's be warm in the East this Sunday because the Bears and the Eagles, they won't stop each other. I don't see how they're going. The Eagles, with their running game and their offense, Bears couldn't stop anybody, and now the Bears are hard to stop with their passing attack. The Eagles can't stop anybody there. I think that game could be in the 40s if it's nice weather this week.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I do think that the Eagles, they've been a bit inconsistent here as of late, but I do think the defense has gotten better offensively. Yeah, I believe that they're going to move the ball. They're going to run the ball effectively, and I agree with you that the Bears should have some success. I find what may be interesting in that game is, depending on what happens in the Dallas game earlier, if Dallas wins that game, then it's going to come down to Week 17 to see who wins the division, regardless of whatever happens with the game for the Eagles against the Bears. So, do the Eagles maybe back off a little bit? Do they maybe rest some guys? I think, LaShawn McCoy, he's in contention for the NFL rushing title. He's not going to want to come out, but there could be an impact on what happens in the Cowboy game on then, how the Eagles play it. On the other hand, if the Cowboys lose the early game, the Eagles have a chance to clinch the division with a win. So a lot will be dependent, I think, on what the Eagles do based on what happens in the Cowboy-Redskin game.
Agreed, and I'll tell you this, too. The Redskins got a big chance in that game because I watched them last week, and they should have killed the Falcons. They had basically more than double the yardage. They had 7 turnovers.
Yeah.
And they lost by 1 point. They were up and down the field the entire day, and they had fumbles. They had fumbles going in for touchdowns. They had almost 500 yards. The Falcons had like 200, and the game was 1 point.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to see that
7
game, but it sure looked like Kirk Cousins. He played well.
He did.
I
he
think
did.
That, that game against Dallas, I expect Washington to play well. Defensively, they've had a lot of troubles for a number of years, but they have given Dallas some fits, and they've played them overall pretty well. And I think Washington is better this week in terms of playing the Cowboys with Kirk Cousins than they would be with Robert Griffin. Primarily, that's not anything negative about Robert Griffin. It really is the fact that Kirk Cousins is given an opportunity here to show that he can play in this league and kind of create some opportunities for him in the future. And he proved it last week. He played well, and I would expect him, of course, who hasn't played well against Dallas? But right. I expect him to come out and do a lot of good things in this game. And I think it's going to be a hard ball game for the Cowboys.
I league in defensive penalties, have 1 million turnovers, and let's be honest, Stafford's got a lot of talent, but boy, he's got a little Brett Favre in him. He's going to throw 2 to them and 4 to his own guys and 2 to the other guys.
Yeah, I think Favre was he was obviously a great player and he had a unique style, and if he wasn't as great as he was in so many areas, there's some coaches that just wouldn't have tolerated some of the mistakes, and
he threw a lot of balls up for grabs.
A lot of them ended up, being touchdowns, as we know, but they were risky throws. And I think there are a number of guys. I think Tony Romo is one of those guys who grew up watching Brett Favre. He's from Wisconsin, and then Matthew Stafford as well. That hey, it's okay. I'm going to make. I can't stop slinging the ball. And hey, Jimmy Johnson would always say to us, Mike, and I've used this on the air, and he would preach it just about every week, and he'd say, hey, it's not how many great plays you make, it's how few bad plays you make, and there's a lot of truth to that. If you don't beat yourself, sometimes it's hard for the opponent then to beat you too, and you just got to go out there and you got to play smart. You've got to give yourself a chance to make big plays, but you can't continually beat yourself the way they have.
Yeah, surprised that Rodgers hasn't come back.
I am. I had that exact same injury. I missed 5 games. And
what was the key to coming back? What was it? What had to happen for you to come back?
Well, for me, Mike, which was where Rodgers was a couple weeks ago. That even though people say, "Hey, it's the left shoulder," you can get out there and play. The pain was excruciating. Trying to turn and make throws. So once I got to where I could throw without pain, I guess maybe this is a suggestion on my worth, but nobody did any tests or scans in order to see how far along the bone was. All it was
shows you a different world. That's
it was
a
different world. Yeah,
so you were worth a lot. It's just that it's a different world.
Yeah, no pain throwing, great. You're in the game, and I missed 5 weeks. So if he was pain free a couple weeks ago, I think it's reasonable to think that just because now you've gotten over the pain doesn't necessarily mean that the bone's strong enough to absorb a hit.
Hey, in this world now, you might not have passed those protocols that week to play quarterback in the Super Bowl. You know that?
More than likely I would not have played in the Super Bowl. That was the most significant concussion that I had was that NFC championship game. I would not have played. In fact, in all honesty, Mike, had that not have been the Super Bowl, I wouldn't have played anyway.
I know, because I did a thing with Jimmy on TV Thursday, and he was really worried about you. He said, "Don't say anything," but I'm really worried about Troy. Yeah. He says, "This is tough. We
didn't have the week off.
I remember.
Between those games, so." But there's no doubt. The league, what they've done with regards to the concussions is, I think it's great. It's great. I know the players sometimes get frustrated with it, but in the long run, these guys are going to be thankful for it.
Yeah, in the last, and again, this is not to make you the judge and jury and the answer for all this, but as a guy who was playing quarterback, what would you have wanted done to Dez Bryant if he walked off the field?
Well, I think what players want is they want accountability, and Dez is a terrific player. He is loved within that organization. The coaching staff loves him. The players love him, and you sit and visit with him, and he is a likable young man. And sometimes you see the theatrics, and you get a different impression if that's all you're seeing. So I get that they're trying to accommodate him and realize, hey, it was an honest mistake. But having said that, you can't have it, Mike. And they could have fined him. You don't suspend him; he's too valuable to your team. But it would have been very easy to say, "Hey, Des, look, you understand you can't do that. We're going to fine you. We're not going to make a big deal about it, but there's got to be consequences." So I think that would have been the right thing to do. I think not doing anything was wrong.
Do you think Romo shakes these things off as well as it looks like he does?
With regards to his play?
Yeah, and the criticism and I'll be better next time.
I do. I really do. I mean, he hears it. We all would. I mean, we all hear criticism. Nobody likes it, but I really do believe that he's pretty grounded and he understands kind of where he is in the big scheme of things and what he's trying to accomplish. And if it does bother him, you sure wouldn't know talking to him. He seems to go about his day with a smile on his face and not worrying about whatever's happened in the past and remains optimistic. But having been in those situations, after tough losses and the scrutiny and what is involved in that, heck, Mike, there were times I wouldn't get out of the house for a week. I'd go right to the complex and back home. And, how he does it, I don't know.
It's funny. I know it's hard to defend his December record and his mistakes late and the fact that they haven't been productive in the playoffs. He's a really talented player. He's a good player. He's a talented. I know that it all has to add up at the end, and he's still got stuff to prove, but he is a good player.
No, he is a good player. And what's really interesting is with the December, and it's not all Tony Romo, of course, as we know, but it's also not all Tony Romo with the November record that he has, which is outstanding. So it's really amazing to me that a November record could be so great and yet the December record so poor. You would think that, okay, well, maybe the December is not as good as November, but does it have to be that dramatically
Plus, they
poor?
get the 11 days off. Landry's record was, in the great years, was I never looked at yours with Jimmy and those guys, but Landry's was probably real good, too. Landry's record was sensational after Thanksgiving every year.
Yeah, and they've had teams that are, it's one thing if you're on a bad team, but there have been some good teams. This team right now is, they're just not very good.
They have no defense. They have no
defense.
Players,
They've got players that
I never heard
shouldn't be playing in the NFL.
I never heard of these guys.
And so that's what they're dealing with, and injuries. But everyone has them. I don't think it's unique to the Cowboys. They just haven't handled it very well. And offensively, they've just had some mistakes in poor times. But I know Jerry Jones is the eternal optimist, and he says, hey, it's still all out in front of them, and it is. But they're going to need to win this week.
Thank you, Troy, very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Troy Aikman, Fox Sports.